As usual, welcome to Clay and Conversations. I am Jennifer Swilling, the curator and director of artistic programs at the Clay Studio. And today I'm broadcasting live from Moore College of Art, where we're having the Craft Now annual symposium. So I just moderated a panel about AI and art, and now I'm here with all of you lovely people. So it is definitely a time to be together with our creative folks and take some time to just feel each other's support. So that's what I'm going to say about that. I'm going to start by reminding you that it is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, probably by next week. We would like to recognize that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenapehoking, the traditional homelands of the Lenape people. We would like to take a moment to reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past, present, and future stewards of the land, and the role of all of us to join in their tradition of respect and caring for the land and each other. If you are interested in helping to keep these programs free, you can go to our website and go to the support section and feel free to donate to the exhibition fund. It's very appreciated. We also want to note that in 2 weeks, there will be a Clay and Conversations with Cesar Viveros and Chase Cowanet Earls, who are other artists in the future of clay. So we are here today because we have Michelle Im and Morel Doucet. Thank you to you both for joining us again, because they are both artists in the future of clay, supported by the William Penn Foundation. We're very grateful to them, and co-curated by Angelique Viscarando-Laboy, Anya Montiel, and Zinzi Harley. So thanks to all of those people. So I'm going to start by introducing each of them. Morel Doucet is a Miami-based multidisciplinary artist and art educator who hails from Haiti. His work utilizes ceramics, illustrations, and prints to discuss the impact of climate gentrification, migration, and displacement affecting Black communities in the African diaspora. Through a contemporary reconfiguration of the Black experience, his work catalogs a powerful record of environmental decay at the intersection of economic inequality, pollution, and policymaking. Doucet's Emmy-nominated work has been featured and reviewed in numerous publications, including Vogue Mexico, the New York Times, Oxford University Press, and others. He graduated from the New World School of the Arts with a Distinguished Dean's Award for Ceramics. From there, he continued his education at the Maryland Institute College of Art, receiving his BFA in ceramics with a minor in creative writing and concentration in illustration. Doucet's work is held in many museum collections and has been exhibited extensively in national and international institutions. Welcome, Morel. Michelle Im creates ceramic objects that explore themes of home, displacement, and cultural identity in the context of globalization. Through the lens of traditional Korean ceramics, Im examines the impact of historical and cultural forces on her Korean American identity. Using the vessel as a metaphor for the human body, she addresses the psychological aspects of embodying conflicting cultural ideologies, such as individualism and collectivism. Michelle is based in Queens. She is a 2024 Artist Fellow at the Museum of Arts and Design, where I should say was, and is an award recipient at the Center for Craft Teaching Artist Cohort. Her residencies and fellowships are many. They include her time at Watershed now and in the past, Penland School of Craft, Archie Bray. She holds a BA in Biological Sciences and Art from the University of Buffalo, SUNY, and is a faculty member at Greenwich House Pottery. Welcome, Michelle. We are going to start with our question, which is, how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art? And I'm going to ask Morel to be the first.
Can we pull up the PowerPoint?
Oh, you want to do it with your slides? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. One moment. Okay, there you go.
All right, so I'm going to start off with some slides. So I'm a first generation immigrant, living here in the US. My parents got political asylum in the late 1980s. We moved to the US in 1994. Throughout my time as a student in school, I was very fortunate to have an art teacher that cared very deeply for me. She saw this very raw and innate talent in me at a very young age. So she convinced my mom to audition me into the specialized art school that were happening in the early 90s in South Florida. And so I auditioned and then I got in through these magnet art program. And so from fifth grade through high school, I've been part of a specialized magnet art program. In this slide, these were the images I was working on during my last year as a junior at as a junior and senior at New York School of the Arts. And a lot of these works, they connect to some themes I work with today. But in this point in my life, I was examining themes of the double consciousness, ideas of transformation and identity. Growing up being Haitian American, I grappled a lot with my identity. Um, Thinking about, I left Haiti when I was very young, and then I had to assimilate into American culture. And so there was a point where I struggled with that in terms of where I fitted with my identity. And these works were things I was creating in that point in life that helped me investigate and explore these ideas and exploration that I was having in life. And so going back to this metaphor of a larva or a caterpillar, I felt like between high school and college, I underwent this huge transformation. And I went from a very deeply introverted student to being very vocal and outspoken throughout my time in college. We can, I guess, let me see what's the next slide. Um, and so um, this is more so like recent work that I've completed. But this work connects back to my Haitian identity. A lot of the work that I do just connects to the experience of Blackness and what does that mean. And so in these two images over here, there's one piece that was done back in 2015 called Tea with the Queen. And this piece explores the very complex relationship between Haiti and the French government. For those that are not aware of Haitian history, Haiti was the first country in the Western Hemisphere to gain their independence. Um, and as a result of that, we had a embargo placed on us by the US, and part of that embargo completely crippled the education sector of the country, as well as the national this the experience of the island completely. We had to pay back the French, quote unquote, for their lost revenue. There was a point in the early 1800s where Haiti was the biggest exporter of sugar and coffee. And so the French said that they lost a big part of the revenue, and we had to pay back them, even though they had enslaved the people on the island. And so if you do the math today, it's estimated that Haiti paid back the French what is equivalent to around $33.2 billion today. And so this piece here, Tea with the Queen, was created around the idea of what happened if the French government and the Haitian government were to have a conversation and sit at the table. And we talk about getting restitution back to the Haitian people and getting that money we had to pay the French government back to the Haitian people, and how that would transform and elevate the island into a different state that it is right now. And then the piece on the left was a work that was commissioned by American Craft Magazine in 2021. And this piece pays homage to the president that was assassinated. And so both piece talks about the pros of Haiti and the ever-changing political landscape that's been happening um, as of now. So I'll stop at that. I'll let Michelle go.
Oh, sorry, you passed the baton.
Oh,
Um, uh,
actually, hold on one sec, if you don't mind. I'm
uh,
going to ask Morel a couple questions about his
yep,
original answer, and then is that okay?
Yeah.
yep.
Um, Although hopefully you all can't hear, there's a little bit of noise from another room here. Sorry if there's like background noise, but I'm really interested in the imagery that you showed on that first slide, Morel, from your high school time. And you talked about kind of going from being an introvert to an extrovert, and that your artwork was so based on the idea of emergence and the, caterpillars and coming through those, the human faces coming out of those states of change. Can you talk a little bit about, do you think that being able to visualize that um, emergence or that transformation was
Mhm.
something that helped you go through it in your kind of personality as well?
Yeah, I would say that I think for me, going through the process of creating the work, it made the experience more tangible for me. I think when you're a first generation, you're in a new country, there's so many experiences that you're going through, and sometimes words cannot quantify those experiences. And so for me, by having a dedicated time in school to create work about how I was feeling, it made it gave me a sense of validation and in those moments where the words could not express how I was feeling, the work was able to speak for me.
Mm,
And so those work for me was very important because like I said, there's so many aspects of land, landscape, leaf, flora, and fauna that I used today in my practice
mm,
that when I look back in high school, a lot of those symbolism and iconographies were there, but I just didn't have the words to maybe vocalize what these experiences meant to me.
mm. And thank you. That's then leads me to another question about the idea that you moved to Miami when you were in Haiti as a small kid. Were you
Mhm.
living in a more country or rural situation when you were there? Do you
Um,
think?
Yeah, so I was raised in Haiti primarily by my grandparents. My mother was an educator, my dad was in the medical field, and so they were working, and so I grew up on a farm, with chicken, goats, in the environment. My grandfather lived in the mountains, where if you had to walk to it, it would be at least like an hour and 30-minute walk to
Mm,
get to his house.
mhm,
And so at an early age, my grandfather instilled this connection to land and sea, and how we as humans were microscopic compared to the world around us.
mhm,
And so I was able to, like, when I think about my experience coming to the US, when we got political asylum, my family had like 72 hours to pack everything that belonged to them and change lives completely. And so we were plucked out of Haiti and we were dropped in Mobile, Alabama, and
mm,
we lived there for 6 months, which was a complete culture shock to my parents as well as myself. We left this tropical island and then we were dropped in the middle of like late fall, early December. And so the sky was gray, the trees were dying. We just, from that age, I didn't understand what was happening. I'm just like, we were dropped in this wasteland. Everything is dead around us. And so again, like these moments that I was unable to express through words, it became tangible through touch. So by touching the tree, I could see that, oh, maybe there's still life left in the tree, even though there's no leaves on it, but there's still life somewhere in that tree. Through the birds and things like that. And so a lot of my memory I can recall through sound, through taste, texture, and that is translated through the work in clay.
mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It feels so visceral looking at those early works of art, and then also your current work that's so connected to flora and fauna and the natural world. That maybe that idea of like the nostalgia of your early time, and you're saying with your grandparents on the farm, like surrounded by nature, and then kind of being transplanted into a completely different environment. Um, makes a lot of sense. And I love that you shared that idea that when even when you were a kid, you could sort of look at the fall leaves and the trees and know that there was still life. Like that's such a hopeful metaphor. And I also wonder if maybe the idea that you perhaps, and I'm not sure, like I don't want to make an assumption, but maybe you were French speaking and then you had to learn English when you came or switch,
Yeah.
and that the language of the visual art was a language that you could then use to kind of like process your feelings, as you were saying.
hmm when you're again first generation and you're the eldest, you're forced to grow very fast. And so I remember, even though I remember like by age 9, 10, I had to translate documents for my parents
Mm,
because there was a, you know, and so I went through childhood relatively quickly.
mm,
And so art was my escape to dream and have that autonomy to myself.
mm,
And so the fact that, I think the art teacher, like she saw this innate raw talent in me, and she pulled my mom aside and was just like, hey, your son has something really special. And there's schools in Miami that will take his talent and cultivate it
mm,
and offer him a possibility of a career.
mm,
And so even though my mom was an immigrant, art was completely foreign as a concept. She embraced it because it had academia as part of it.
mm,
And so in order for you to be part of the specialized program, you also had to excel academically. And so the fact that these programs, they were very core things to do in order to stay. My mom embraced the entire process.
mm, mm. That's so wonderful. And again, sort of highlights the importance of adults in your life believing in you and having a strong art educator in your life that really made a big difference. And then you chose to go into museum education as part of your art career. I imagine that might have had an effect
Mhm.
on you that you had that important art educator in your past.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so great. Thanks so much, Morel. We are going to switch to Michelle, and then we'll come back to you to look at more of your artwork. Michelle, who is also an art educator and is in the process of, let's see, yesterday you said you taught art educators. So
Yes.
we'll get to that in a sec, but I'll go back to the original question for you, which is how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Um, so I've always wanted to be an artist since I was as a kid. And my
But wait, I have
father
to
is
I have
actually
to challenge that for 1 second. Not challenge it, but question further, like how did you know that that a person could be an artist? Do you remember that? Like early
yes, yeah,
realization?
yeah. I have a story for that. So I've always wanted to be an artist, and my father's actually the person who first introduced me to watercolor painting. My father was a scientist. He was an environmental engineer, research scientist, but he was always kind of like a loner and really enjoyed nature. And so I think like through nature, he really taught me how to like observe and paint, and just kind of like uh, be imaginative and creative. And then my mom put me into like a clay animation class at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and I was around, I think like 7, or I think I was like 8 years old. And really, that experience taking that class opened my eyes to like I already knew that I loved art, I drew all the time and all of that, but that's like the moment where I saw adults doing clay figures, and like that was the first time I realized, wow, like people do this when they're like adults too. And it really just I just that's like the moment where it clicked, and I got so like obsessed with this that like you're probably familiar with like Boston blizzards and stuff, but there was a blizzard coming. But I like kind of forced my mom to drive like we literally drove 5 miles an hour on the highway for like 2 hours to like get to this class, because I just was like, I am not, we are like not going to this class. And I know that the classroom is open. So I don't know why she agreed to that, but it's funny because like during that drive, and she must have been so stressed out, like you couldn't see the road. But we stopped and she like um impulsively bought a dining table, which we still have in the house in Korea. They live in Korea now, but so every time we see that dining table, we always talk about that story. And and I showed up and for some reason the classroom, yeah, it was open and I was like the only one there. And I just was like, I think about that a lot because I think the way I work and like my drive and everything is just like it's very much that. Like I don't really kind of question it, but yeah, that experience, like seeing that was kind of like solidified, or it just gave me like the idea, the glimpse of like, oh, this can be a career. But it took a really long time for me to like, I explored other career pathways and things like that. Always like wanted to be an artist, but I think, in being a young adult, especially, I went straight to New York City. It's really tough to just kind of like figure things out because it's so fast paced. And but yeah, I think so I was a painter first, and then and my parents didn't really understand what that was about, but I think once I started doing ceramics, which was now like 12 years ago, that really made sense to my parents because like my uncle had a ceramic factory in China for 30 years. And so it's kind of like in the family. So it made sense to them. They're like, oh yeah. When I told them I was doing ceramics, they were like, oh yeah, people do that. That's like a profession. And and they don't really understand sculpture, but if I say, oh well, sometimes I have like mugs and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, your uncle did that.
That's hilarious because it's so not the way it normally goes. It's like people have this idea of like, oh, if you're an artist, that means you paint. So that's what they can wrap their head around. And then people are like, oh, but I make art out of clay. And they're like, what? So your parents are the opposite, which I love. Um, that's great. Okay, so I would like to point out that both of your stories had intense connections to weather.
Mm.
That the idea of like arriving in the fall and experiencing that, and then this blizzard as part of your sort of origin story as an artist is pretty cool. So do you want to talk a little bit about the transition when you chose clay and chose to sort of like have that as your main medium?
Yeah, I mean, throughout college, so I attended art school, and then halfway through, I actually ended up switching my major to biology. And I think for me, like in college, I should backtrack and just say, like, I was born in the US and then I moved to Korea when I was 11, which came as I mean, it was a huge culture shock. I went to traditional Korean schooling and I lived there for 5 years. And, I didn't know how to read, speak, or write Korean until, a few years in. And so, because that was like during my adolescence, and that really kind of limited my education experience. And so I think in college, even though I really wanted to be an artist, I just felt like there were gaps in my education too. And like, and maybe it comes from my father being a scientist and also interested in art. Like, I really wanted to have this balance and I wanted to know just more about that side. So I kind of like studied both in college. And then afterwards, I went to New York City first as an educator. And then I had a painting practice for a while. But really, I think with painting, I just always felt like I was floating and there was nothing like that made me feel grounded. And so when I took my first ceramic class at Greenwich House Pottery, that's when I was like, I think I just remembered that childhood experience of like the clay figure and just and feeling that emotion again of like, this is it, like this is the medium. And so at Greenwich House, ever since I took that class, I was like, I just felt like it really spoke to me, the medium itself. And because I think like the medium just holds a lot of different fields in one, there's a science brain that that it exercises, and I'm really interested in chemistry, and so that aids like to the making of the object, and then it's like creative expression. So yeah, once I found ceramics, then yeah, I felt like I was really it really exercised a lot of different parts of my brain that felt very fulfilling.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing. And again, there's all these other connections too, that you each kind of in childhood moved to a place where you didn't know the language, and you had to learn that language, and that maybe visual art was a way for you to be able to express yourself kind of outside of those verbal confines that were maybe problematic at the time. And you even used the phrase that the clay spoke to you when you were talking about that it felt like the right mediums. I love that. You were saying it holds lots of different fields, and it also just holds so many metaphors for like communication and sharing emotions and things like that. So that's great. I love it when there's all these connections between people. And you two have never met before, right? So, and we're
No.
but we'll talk a little bit more about some other visual connections. We are going to switch back and look through some more slides. So here is Morel's work again. And then so now as you're both going to talk through your slides a little bit, I'd love for you to incorporate that idea of, the prompt for this show was to think about the future of clay and how that had an impact on the work that you made for the exhibition. So do you want to go first, Morel?
Absolutely. So this is my contribution to the exhibition, The Future of Clay. And it was one of those pieces where I knew I wanted to make something blue because I've been in a season of making blue pieces. The color blue, for some reason, is a reoccurring color in the work I've been producing. Um, and so this particular piece has been part of an ongoing series of altars I've been creating for humanity. And this particular altar is called the Blueprint. And these altars is for humanity to reconsider devices of environmental destruction. Um, with ceramic, I use primarily porcelain. With porcelain ceramic, in this clay in general, it holds a unique place in our human history. With ceramic, we're able to study the human condition. We can look into different cultures. We can understand the dietary of that culture. We can understand the medicine that they took based on the residue that are coated on the inside of certain potteries. With ceramic, it also connects to economics. There was a moment in our human history where porcelain had the same monetary value as gold. And so if you walk into someone's home, one way they would very one way they would show wealth without verbally saying that I'm wealthy would be to have some kind of porcelain in the mantle of their home. So when you're walking into the front door, near the entry, there's some kind of porcelain piece there as a status of wealth. It showed that this person was very sophisticated and very fine, as well. And so with these pieces, there are elements of human and nature that are morphing into these different forms. And really it's showing that between the battle of man and nature, nature will always persevere. No matter how much we think we can tame nature, eventually nature will consume us. And so it's like the earth has been here from the beginning, and the earth, will be here after us. And so with um, is the color blue is the idea of a good intention. Is supposed to exude positivity and good luck. But at the same time, it's also a stark kind of warning. Like we are reaching the point in our human condition where there will be a point of no return. And we're seeing that right now in Florida, throughout the Caribbean with these hurricanes. They're becoming very, very strong. Within this past 6 months, there've been 6 major floods across the entire globe, ranging from Canada to France to Spain to Dominican Republic. And so these things that scientists predicted over a decade ago are becoming true and they're happening before our eyes. So for those that are saying that climate change is not real, well, the evidence is in front of your face. And so this particular piece, I want to evoke that. But then with my work, I consider it to be a double-edged sword. I never want to impose my political belief on anybody. And so I invite the viewer through a sense of beauty, and that kind of attracts him to the work. And then you, as the viewer, you have the agency to decide what is the messaging you're getting from the work. And this is kind of how I feel as a museum educator. If the work has to rely on a didactic for you to connect and experience the work, then me as an artist have failed completely behind the messaging. I feel like the work should live on its own, simply a title, and the viewer should have some kind of entry point to experience the work on their own. And so yes, this is why the piece is blue in the exhibition compared to the ones that are white. Can we go to the next image, please?
Mhm.
And so within the series of the work, I do both representational and figurative work. This one in particular, it pays homage to Maya Angelou, but also this is a piece that is focusing on environmental displacement. So I'm using the birds as a metaphor for change and flight. When you go into communities of color, these communities are at the mercy of climate and and change, and so certain neighborhoods, if you can't afford the rent anymore, then you're going to be displaced by the developers. And so this work here is alluding to that as well. And then it's also a hybrid. Within my work, I like to borrow from different cultures to create my own experience. And so with this particular piece, there's influence from the San people of Africa, and they're a African group that have very Asian features. And so people, when they look at these pieces, they ask me, are these Asian? I'm like, no, they're African. They're from a very unique tribe in Africa that exude these particular features. And then if you also notice the carving on the face, that borrows from the Nigerian bronze pieces. And so that's another element where I'm using different cultures as a hybrid to fuse the work as part of that experience. And then what is the next one? I forgot the next piece. Sorry. And then I'll connect to this one later. Let's go back to the other one. This is like a special story. And so yeah, and so within my work, porcelain is an important element for me, because of the status of porcelain in our human history, I use it as the same. I use it as a way to elevate the status of the work. So I'm using this very refined material to show the urgency of the subject matter and how important it is. But then I'm doing it in a very refined kind of way that gives the viewer, again, this experience that this is something that is important. This is something that you should handle with care. And this is the end product of that experience. And then this piece here, this is a piece called The Brown Menagerie. This piece is done around a very interesting study around the color brown. This study was done in South America, where a group of scientists and anthropologists went into a schoolyard and they had boxes of crayons, and they did the study with 1,000 kids. Each student had to choose one color from the box of crayon. And after the study was done with 1,000 students, out of all the colors from the box of crayon, the color brown was never chosen from the study. And so the study went on to examine the psychology around the color brown. It explored, is it part of our human condition that we associate brown with the color that is maybe rotten, something that is decay?
Mm,
something that is not good, something that is kind of rotten.
mm,
And then it also talked about the societal impact around the color brown and how does that connect to ideas um of skin, of access, of privilege as well. And so this piece was done in direct response to that study, where I'm thinking about ideas of the working class, um, groups that have a disability, and the idea how, despite all of these exploration in the study, brown is still this color that is fetishized. And so I wanted to create the work as these chocolate pieces that makes them desirable. Maybe they're even edible, but then they're made out of porcelain. And so this piece is a very tongue-in-cheek exploration of this particular study.
mm. Wow, that's really interesting, that study.
And then last piece, this is an important piece in my different bodies of work. This is the piece that got me signed to my gallery back in 2015. This piece is called Clockwork and is using the metaphor of the doomsday clock to talk about the pending destruction of humanity. And so the center of the clock is a figure, the face is completely blind, and is a commentary on how humanity as a collective, we're turning a blind eye to what is happening before our eyes. And so within the clock, there's these different degrees of experiences. And so it goes from brown to gray to white. And these talks about, again, there's going to be a point of no return where no matter how much color or pigment we try to throw on things, that color will forever be gone. And we're seeing it in evidence of the coral reef bleaching. With coral reef, they take thousands of years to fully mature. And we have reefs that are completely dying out, and we won't see them ever grow back within our lifetime to the full capacity of what they used to be. And so this work is a call to action on humanity again to do something about what is happening to the environment and the urgency of that.
Thanks, Meryl. Um, and then these two other pieces are also included in the exhibition. So hopefully people will be able to come in person and check them out. So maybe these are related to the ones you talked about, and then we'll come back to them when we talk about the connection to Michelle's work. So Michelle, do you want to talk through your slides here?
Yeah, so I was awarded a studio fellowship at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York City this year. And so during this residency, I was really interested in ideas about home and through home, through Korean traditional ceramics, I was kind of researching different forms, and this moon jar is something that I kind of was really obsessed about and have been kind of thinking for several years to kind of reinterpret it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with the other slides, but this is kind of connected to that, and that like when I think about the moon jar symbolically, it kind of it's like this it has become like an icon of like the Korean national identity, which is something that I have like very mixed feelings about because of my upbringing and my experience of living in both places here and Korea. But still, when I think about home, I think of home as the state of like just being in a state of transit. And this past February, I went to Korea to see my parents, whom I haven't seen for 7 years. And so being on that flight of like 15 hours, I was just like sitting on that plane, and for some reason, like I just really enjoy that flight. It's like the kind of this like moment of like peace that I feel on this journey, like in between my two homes. And my boyfriend always thinks that I'm like crazy for that. But it's kind of like this 15-hour meditation that I have. And then, being on that Korean airline flight, I I'm just also like mesmerized by these flight attendants. So this is about it stands at about like 4 feet tall. But this is one of the pieces that I worked on during my residency at the Mad Museum. And she kind of symbolizes home for me. And it's full of mixed feelings in that like she's um she brings me comfort. And when I'm on that flight, I look at her face and I just feel like everything is melting away, and and all the food is like being perfectly served. And it's like this theater, that happens on this flight. And they're like totally in control, and every part of their uniform is just so immaculate. Like their hair, there's no strand of hair popping out anywhere. And so I've just kind of like observed all those details. But then behind that is like the sense of creepiness too. Because like, there's no way that they could be this perfect. And I know that there's like a life behind this image. And I oftentimes like, perhaps like that's kind of the feeling that I have about Korean culture on the outside, when I'm, seeing like the evolution of K-pop even, and like certain cultural exports like BTS and things like that. It's a contrast to like the lived experience in Korea, especially when I went there. And so yeah, this is kind of like, again, like thinking about home. Um, and maybe we can go to the next slide. Oh yeah, so and then this one, it's much smaller, and it's part of like my Moonjar series. And so I made a variety of different interpretations of this classical Moonjar form, which comes from 18th century Joseon dynasty. And just in short, like the Moonjar, what I find interesting about it is that it's thrown on two bowls separately and then joined together. And so I find that just kind of symbolizing my cultural identity of like how of holding both sides together constantly. And I'm always interested in what's on the inside. And so this is one of many different interpretations. But with this particular piece, I was thinking about this incident that happened on Korean Airline about 10 years ago. And basically, the Heather Cho, which was the VP of Korean Airline, she got on the flight and then was served a bag of macadamia nuts, still enclosed in its plastic bag. And then she was so upset, she like flipped out that she was upset about the macadamia nuts not being opened and then served directly on a nice plate. And so she ended up attacking the flight attendant, and then made the plane turn around and kick them off the flight. And the story is just, I totally forgot about the story, but like I really find it like it's kind of funny. I mean, it's kind of comical in a very dark way. And you kind of see this like thread of dark humor in a lot of like Korean cinema. I don't know if you all watched Parasite, but won the Palme d'Or one year, and a lot of Korean cinema touches on this class struggle. And there's always like this thread of dark humor. And so yeah, so this piece is kind of talking about that incident. And for me to understand culture, I think for me, like I always kind of gravitate towards like utilizing humor to as like a way of healing. So this one was about that.
Mm.
This one is also part of the Moonjar series, and it's called Hodori. And Hodori is the mascot of the 1988 Seoul Olympics, which is a really important part of Korean history. And it's thought to be like the kind of like the starting point of rapid economic development in South Korea. And I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I feel like this is more this one in particular, I feel like relates to the theme of the future of clay, because I think more and more as I get older, like I'm thinking about like the impact of the division between North and South Korea. And so this piece is about that, and like it's kind of a puzzle piece. You can see it apart, and see it apart, and then you can also put it together in the image to the left. And when it's together, it holds a plate that's in the shape of the Korean Peninsula. And so this is more of like a contemplation about like division and possible reunification. It's not really like an answer or an opinion. It's just more like observing the fact that, this country that where I'm from is it's a result of war and violence and other people's wars, and the division still exists. And I think this question weighs very heavily on Korean people, and I think it's really something that affects not only like the culture or the psychology of people, but also something that even I think affects my daily life in terms of like the ways in which I think about different cultures. Like, it's always like this clash, right? Of like one side being more individualistic and one side being more collectivistic. And it's always like this tension between those two. And so this piece kind of like examines that, and I'm trying to kind of express the complicated nature of like something that's very kind of political too. So
Yeah, and that the two sides of the moon jar is another, yeah, two
yeah.
sides of the north and south.
Yeah, and then this one I call the Enlightenment cookie. I think sometimes in the title I want to evoke humor. So, but this one, it's painted with like lotus, like kind of like a lotus flower, but it's one of the iterations of the moon jars that I made during my residency. And this one, so they're all kind of like built in coils in like in the full like moon jar form, and then I'm using a process of like deconstruction and reassembling. And I feel like the act of that process of like reassembling it, it almost like symbolizes like the reconstruction of my identity, because I think it's just like, having like many cultures within you. It's like, there's no like, we talk about balance and stuff, and there's like this concept of yin and yang, and it sounds really beautiful, but actually it's kind of like, it's a lot more complicated than that. And so I'm trying to express that through the process of making these objects. So like this one, it's like a stacked moon jar. And again, like many of the other pieces that I made, it's yeah, you can see it separated. And when it's separated, you see other layers of images, like in the cross section. And then when it's together, it's all kind of like contained. And then I should also talk about how I've been playing around with textiles also. It's not fully developed, but I wanted to add an element of just non-clay material to the pieces. So this one has some like black yarn that I found, which reminded me of my hair. So yeah, that's kind of what that's about.
Oh, and then I've been wondering about the red dot.
Oh yeah. So I'm pulling elements from Korean traditional painting, and oftentimes you see like the red dot, which symbolizes the sun, and then the white dot, which is the moon,
Mm,
and so it's like the yin and yang.
got it. And is that this red dot too?
Yeah, that's the red dot, and also for that one, I thought of it as like a belly button.
Um, okay, thank you. And I'm going to show everybody a few images of the exhibition. Here's Michelle's work in the gallery. This is what it looks like if you haven't had a chance to visit when you walk in. There's Morel's work. What I'm sorry that you kind of can't see is that at the very edge of our timeline, this is the timeline that's indicating our 50th anniversary year, we actually used an image of Morel's this bust right here. And so it's actually up on the wall in this picture, and it's been there all year. And so now when you walk in the gallery, there's a moment where you can kind of like peek it in on the wall and then see the real piece right there. So that's pretty fun for me. Um, and then some of the other work in the show. And then we don't have too much more time, we have about 5 minutes, but Morel suggested talking about as you've all heard throughout this whole talk, that there are just all of these amazing connections and similarities about lines of thinking. And working with the figure is not actually really, it is certainly not the main I would say thread of this sort of main the general ceramic art field. So I love that you're both working with a sort of somewhat realistic figurative piece. And again, like maybe focusing on a little bit of like why your works are thinking about the future. Um, Morel, do you want to start with like maybe thinking about connections that you're seeing between the two works of art or the two kind of bodies of work in general?
Yeah, one thing that I could say is the figure is such a recognizable form. And so as an artist, when you choose to use that as a theme, you can immediately connect into the human condition. Um, and so, with my piece, the figure has this kind of crown around the exterior of the head. And then if you look at the jewelry, it references the idea of there's chairs and there's the what you call it, earrings, and they're like things from the kitchen.
Yeah.
And so with this particular piece, it was examining women in the Caribbean, how oftentimes, or more than often, they're the keystone in the household. The women is who really runs the community. A great example of that was during the earthquake back in Haiti.
Mm.
Um, After the earthquake, the men was completely in disarray. The guys could not organize. They kept fighting, and it got so bad that the UN banished all of the men from coming to pick up resources, and only the women were allowed to come and pick up. Because if the women got hold of the goods and the food, they knew that the community would eat because the women would make the food in large batches and multiple people would eat. The men would take the food and they would hide it. They would try to hoard it. And so I think with this piece in particular, it goes back to that lived experience where the women are the matriarchs of the household and they help organize and make things run.
Mm. Well, and that's like so directly related to the Michelle. Do you want to talk about I mean, you sort of said it already, but restate that idea of what she represents?
Yeah, I think through Morel was saying touched on this earlier, but like, the figure is such a great entry point to like many different kinds of conversations. We're both doing some figurative work here, but it's kind of like the conduit to discuss more like complex subject matter, and perhaps like our subject matter is not the same, but it like kind of really I don't know. I think like the figure is just like a great way to have a conversation because it's like easy access, if you talk about accessibility, it's just, I think for someone who doesn't have um a lot of experience like interacting with art, I think when you go into a gallery space and you see figurative work, I find that a lot of, especially like younger kids, they I think there's like a pull, like, because you understand the figure, and it's like a way to really like kind of see, oh wait, maybe there's like other layers that I can think about through this figure.
Mhm.
But it's also really interesting to hear from Morel about. I didn't know that there was a group of people, a tribe in Africa. You were saying, I forget what you said, but
Yeah.
they look Asian because I was looking at that figure. And I was like, I was interested in the same. I had the same question. So I'm glad that you talked about it a little bit because I was like, that looks like me.
Yeah, they're called the San people.
Some people.
Yeah.
S SAAN.
S-A-N people, or sometimes it's spelled SANN people.
Uh-huh.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
I'm really interested in knowing more about that because like I know like there's parts of like I think near Kazakhstan there's also
Hmm.
like yeah, Asian descent.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I guess a recognizable person would be Nelson Mandela. He comes from this particular tribe.
oh, got it. Okay.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting. Well, I was really interested in this idea that in Haiti, the government said only the women could come, and that the women were the ones who were like caretaking and making sure the food was going to get to you. And then, you're looking at Michelle's flight attendant, and this woman represents, care and your
Mm,
transition and providing you with the food that you need and giving you, um, this presentation of
mhm,
everything you need to be cared for, right? And that's actually, happening in both of those um, settings, which is really interesting. So I'd love to hear, we only have a couple more minutes, but does anyone in the audience have a question for our panelists? I'm just gonna see if I can, there we go. Anybody have a question? We're sort of at time, but I'll just leave it for a moment. It's hard for me to wait. I'm always like, if I just wait for 30 seconds, but that's a long time.
or if
I'm sure
anybody,
someone has a question.
It's okay if they don't. You
yeah,
both have
anybody
done
in
a
the
great
crowd,
job.
Oh.
Oh, Leslie has a question. Go ahead, Leslie.
Um, I think it's really a question for you, Jennifer, is the future of clay. So how do these two artists fit into the overall exhibition? And given our sense of future,
Mhm.
this present sense of future, whether it's clay or otherwise, how do you see this work fitting into that sort of momentum?
Yeah, well, I think that what I was sort of thinking when the three co-curators who so generously came together and we had conversations in the beginning, I think that now naively thought that there was going to be some kind of theme that would emerge if once we started talking to the artists. Um, and again, like each one of the curators chose two artists. So Morel, Zinzi Harley selected Morel and his work, and Angelique Viscarando-Lavoie invited Michelle into the exhibition. But what became obvious was just that, it's the artists who are thinking about the future are thinking about all the things that we're nervous about, right? Like Morel is thinking about climate change. I think Michelle, in a lot of ways, you're thinking about kind of geopolitics, and I so it really just becomes a reminder that the artists are the avant-garde. They are the thought leaders in our society that we have to remember. Um, when we're having social issues, we look to what the artists are thinking about, and that's often what we need to be focusing our resources on. Earlier today, as I said, I was leading this panel about AI, and what becomes obvious is that artists are putting these issues into visual forms that go beyond language, which we talked about today, and helping the rest of us kind of grapple with the issues that we're stressed about, or wanting to put our energy into helping and changing. So it's again, artists are the empathy muscle of our society and are helping the rest of us to get through this stressful time that we're in. That's what I think about that.
Also, to add to that too, it's just like to think of like clay as being a medium that's like it's like a record holder. It's like a record keeper. So I feel that like a lot of the artists in the show, like we're looking to the past, and that's like kind of natural in being a ceramicist, like handling clay, this material that holds history, like many histories. And we're all kind of coming together through that material, this record keeper, to make, you know, to bring in new information, or like how we take the past and like just, what Morel does is like combining different cultural influences, because I don't know, I always think about the taco. Like the taco is, it's like, it's what Morel is talking about. It's like Arab influence and all of that coming together, becoming this like recognizable like food, and I always feel like we're making tacos like in the future. And so it's kind of interesting how like I don't know. I think the show really like shows that the exhibition kind of shows that where we're heading is like it's really unknown, but we know for sure that like the history is really important to look at deeply.
And then to piggyback on what Michelle just said, clay has been here since the formation of the planet. When you think of clay from a point of religion, if you think of, if you were like Adam and Eve, coming from the earth, the bone, when we die, we're buried back into the ground as well. So clay is cosmic. It retains memory, it goes under transformation. And the work that we make as artists today will survive us. Clay can survive fire. And so as an artist, we have a responsibility to be mindful of the work that we're making because it's going to be here long after we are gone.
Absolutely. It's going to it's going to exist after humanity. Which is not maybe the greatest comment to end on for me because humanity will endure for a long time to come. And I know that we will all endure the um, stressful situation that we find ourselves in as a society at this moment. And it will endure, in my opinion, because we are surrounded by creativity and using creativity to solve problems. And hopefully that'll lead us to a brighter future. Thank you so much to both of you. This was an amazing conversation. I love all the connections that we found between your art. I think that there's something generational. Evidently I'm like too old to do this. I don't know. Anyway,
No, you're not.
I'm not. Okay, good. I love it. Thanks to all of you for spending an hour with us. This is a great show if you can come see it. These amazing artists. In 2 weeks, we'll have another. And then on December 7th, we will have our symposium. And that will be another great chance to either Zoom in with us or come in person. And we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.